Welcome everyone to a very special episode of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. Now on the show we usually talk about the latest news, tech, content and wisdom from the world of marketing, but this is a special episode. It's episode 49.5. We want to tell you about something special that we're going to do in episode 50, and we've also got a special treat for you this week in this special half episode. So please welcome my co-host, Mr. Pascal Fintoni.
Well, thank you very much, Roger Edwards. It's so nice to be back for, yes, a special recording. We want to say thank you to all of you, our listeners and viewers, for your support for the last 12 months. We released and announced Two Geeks Marketing Podcast on the 29th of July 2020. And a few days later, we released not one, not two, not three, but 4 episodes, because that's what you have to do when you do podcasting. Of course, these are the rules. And here we are. What started, Roger, as really a remedy against boredom and stress for COVID-19 and lockdown has become something that I feel very proud of and almost part of my personal brand and content marketing efforts.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because when we came up with the idea of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast, we were right in the thick of the first lockdown, and we didn't know where things were going. Our businesses had dried up because both of us had lots of speaking engagements, webinars and all of that sort of thing booked, but of course our diaries became pretty clear. So we just sort of motivated ourselves, you and I, to come up with this idea for a podcast. And you're absolutely right, it's become a plank, a foundation stone of both our personal brands, and what's most important is it's a massive amount of fun to do and produce as well.
Well, indeed. And talking fun, it started very early. I remember fondly the beginnings. I'm a big fan of new beginnings, but the conversation we had, the deliberation about the segments we're going to go through in a moment, the choice of the music for the trailer, putting together the scenes, talking to our editor, Tim Orton from Triggerfish Video Productions, who really helped us come up with some of the ideas. And all this would be, would you say, May, June-ish, with the back and forth. And that was already fun in itself. Then off we went recording the first few episodes. And interestingly, I have with me, Roger, and for those of you who can't see, I'm going to flick through those. This is a year's worth of show notes.
Wow.
And when you look at number 1, we knew so little then. We were probably, I would say, a little nervous, not knowing the tone, the pace, not knowing whether, of course, I wasn't so concerned about whether there was an audience for it. I just wanted to make sure that it was in line with my core values and what I wanted to present as a professional. But I would argue that probably from number 10, we find our pace and our ways, and we got the feedback as well. And yeah, long may it continue.
And I think that one of the lessons for me was that, I have my own podcast, the Marketing and Finance Podcast. You have the Content Marketing Studio podcast. And to a certain extent, they're very similar in terms of we interview people about marketing topics and finance topics as well for mine. Whereas what we did with this show is came up with these segments. And each show has a variety of different segments, and we'll talk about those in a bit more detail in a minute. But in the news, film marketing, marketing tech and apps. And I think it's that segmented approach which keeps the pace going and actually makes the podcast different, not only for us as the hosts and the producers of it, but for the people listening and watching as well.
Indeed. I mean, we know people sometimes, they don't follow, they don't watch or listen from start to finish. They jump between different segments, almost as if you would be reading a magazine. But back to your point, you and I had conversations about what is it that we're not doing yet? What is it that perhaps our work doesn't allow us to do? And therefore, this podcast should be almost a platform, the experiment. So I said to you, I'd love something that is, well, post-produced, if I may use the term, something quite polished, because I don't get to do that as often. I want to try the segments. I want to try the different tones and so on. But one thing we did agree on, we have to talk about films.
Absolutely right. And again, the film part of it, I mean, we sort of have a bit of banter in the episodes saying that this is Pascal's favourite part and this is Roger's favourite part. I sort of like all of it. And, in particular weeks I'll think, oh yeah, the content spotlights, absolutely love that this week. But the film marketing, I guess, is the one that really sucks us in. And let's face it, because of the lockdown, my wife and I watch films so much anyway, but the lockdown has just almost increased the frequencies. We used to have Friday night film nights, Saturday night film nights. Now every night is almost film night. So it's been an absolute pleasure to watch those films, and sometimes watching them again, but then to discuss them with you and to dissect them and to look at how those films were marketed. And some of those films, 20, 30 years old, and it's been fun to actually go back and find out what they did. I think it's that variety that's really kept my motivation levels so high in the 50 episodes that we've done.
You're right. It gave us a purpose. The research, the reading of articles for the content spotlights, the keeping track of news for In the News, all this, was given a real purpose and a drive because of the podcast. And it reminds me of something that our good friend Richard Tubb would say around blogging in particular. You say, yes, you want to blog for the business. Yeah, you may want to blog for lead generation and for an audience, but you also want to do it for yourselves. And I have to tell you that those Friday recording sessions have been something I've been looking forward to all the time. I mean, it was quite symbolic. And it was the end of the week after working hard or trying to, on occasion, indeed, combat some of the negative thoughts that comes with the lockdown measures and the reduction in workload. And Denise would say, "Oh, you're smiling. Are you recording today?" I said, "Yes, I am."
And again, I think that I've always said this about podcasting, in that even if you are the host of a podcast and maybe you're interviewing people, we're learning all the time, aren't we, Pascal? Finding the apps that we talk about, we're using some of those apps now. The content spotlights, finding those videos, those articles, those other podcasts. We always learn something new from those people. Some of them are journalists, some of them are experts, some of them are marketing leaders, but we're always learning. And I think that's another thing I like about the show that we do, is that we're hopefully giving our listeners and viewers a little bit of entertainment and a little bit of fun, but we're all learning new stuff together. We're learning every day. It was Chris Marr that coined that phrase, learning every day, but I think that's so important. And I've learned so much about all of the aspects of what we talk about on Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast.
I think what's important about the podcast, back to the discipline, not only we will continue to consume the content, but we have to stop, reflect, summarize, explain, react, and so on. And I think that means that 50 episodes or so later, I feel like in my head I've got a lot more information. Indeed, one of the direct impact and benefit has been I was asked to do a closing keynote at a conference about 3 months ago about essentially this idea of what is the future of online marketing and what is it to create a true online experience. Well, I had all the information from In the News, some of those really innovative campaigns. I had all the history from This Week in History to go back to, and within moments I could sketch the presentation, and then I could spend time on the design of the visuals and so on. But so a direct benefit from doing a podcast is to be a paid speaker at an event and bring back some of that information.
Absolutely right. And what I've also enjoyed as well is some of the themes that have developed over the weeks. Okay, lockdown notwithstanding, that's made the world a very strange place. But, because we talk about marketing tech, because we focus on these content spotlights, it's really reaffirmed to me that there's never been a better time to be a marketing person of any level, marketing assistant all the way up to marketing director, chief marketing officer. We now have access to technology and platforms and gizmos that, we couldn't even have dreamed of when we were younger marketers, Pascal. And now we can do all of this stuff so much more it cost effectively. Stuff now that we can do for a couple of $100 would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, even as recently as 5 to 10 years ago. So we should be really proud of the stuff that we've got access to. But I think also what I think that one of the trends that comes through in the podcast is this total almost focus on tactics now, as a result of the access that we have to all of this technology. And I think that, maybe I'm a bit like a bit of a stuck record, but I try to keep coming back to this in the podcast, that we still need to remember the strategic elements of marketing, the customer definition, the customer research, what's the product, what's the offer, and why does it stand out? And doing all of that before you start using all of these toys and shiny objects. And for me, that message is still very, very important, and I imagine it will continue to be part of what we talk about going forward into the future.
Indeed, they are, and that wasn't predicted by us. So that wasn't for kind of pre-programmed into the production of the podcast. There are some running themes about leadership, about at the moment webinars and running hybrid events. They keep coming back because I've said to you before, I do believe that particularly with the content spotlight, we are almost a mirror of the mood and what is important to people out there. Just before we move on to talking about the segments individually and get some reactions, the one thing that I will say has been a challenge for me in terms of creating this show has been, if I may be frank, the bloody audio. And as I'm saying this, I can imagine our editor nodding away. I feel completely jinxed and cursed. I must be like Sam Neill in Jurassic Park. The moment I try and do anything to improve the audio, it makes it worse. But in the process, I've learned an enormous amount about what sound is, literally from the physics point of view all the way to the production side. But the audio side is hard work, isn't it, Roger, to get right?
I think there must be some sort of universal law, Pascal. Whenever you press a button that has the word record on it, you can guarantee that within 30 seconds, a neighbour will fire up a strimmer, or somebody will start delivering big boxes, or the bin men will come around and start emptying all the bottles into the recycling bin and creating a cacophony of noise. It just seems to happen to us, doesn't it?
Completely. And for me, just completely, I felt like it became very personal. The amount of interference, that kind of ambient atmospheric thing that gets in the way of the good audio. And you and I, and with Tim, we've tried so many ways in which to filter it out, to clean it up with Audacity. We've tried all sorts. And as early as yesterday, I was still trying to improve because somehow whatever we managed to get rid of has come back. It's almost like some entity just chasing me around the world. You say, right, you've had a few weeks of good audio. Let me spoil everything for you. So that to me has been this. We've pushed hard on the video side as well. But one could argue, it's been right, but the audio has been just interesting. So let's begin with In the News. Now, for me, interestingly, I have found over time, this has been the hardest segment to get right. So for viewers and listeners who are regular to the show, we know that we take turns, Roger and I, to prep the show notes and be the lead host, if you will. And I have found that there were weeks where there were almost too much in terms of news. I wasn't sure what to go for. And other times it was so little, I felt little on the back foot. So I have found that in the news segment, albeit enjoyable to record and to talk and get your action on, a fraction harder than the other segments to get right.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And another thing as well is that I think the In the News section has sort of got a little bit longer as time's gone by, because I think right back at the beginning, if we went back and checked, I think that the In the News section might have lasted for about between 7 to 10 minutes. But I think that now we perhaps dig a little bit deeper into the news items, and we've gained our confidence, and we enjoy exploring some of those news items now. So I think that the In the News section has probably grown a little bit, and now sort of almost becomes a 15-minute segment. And that's not a bad thing, because as you say, people can just nip in, they can do the In the News, and they can go away for a meeting, they can come back to film marketing, whatever it is. But at least the In the News section, is never going to dry up of ideas, because there's always something happening somewhere in the world when it comes to marketing.
And back to my point earlier, it gives you wonderful material for presentations, webinars, and more.
Yeah. And I suppose we all have our go-to sources. We have we have a Trello board with all sorts of different links, and when it's our turn to do the research, the first port of call is that Trello board. And moving on, I guess, to the content spotlight section, sometimes you do have to focus and move yourself out of your comfort zone. I make no apology for featuring Mark Ritson's articles as my content spotlights a number of times. And you will always have your go-to content creators, but sometimes you do have to force yourself to look outside of your comfort zone and actually find some new stuff. And I guess that when you actually do find those fabulous nuggets of information, then that's when the real magic happens, because you're discovering something new yourself as well.
What has been interesting and has become a mystery for the show is you and I do not consume the same content. Mm-hmm. We do not go to the same platforms at all, in fact, rarely. And yet the number of times we've chosen very similar in terms of the subject matter and the topic content. You could have chosen a video, I could have chosen an article, but without talking to each other, we end up actually talking about a very, very similar issue.
And maybe it's because the news is shaped that particular week, or maybe you and I just have a telepathic link that we didn't know we had. But yeah, that's it always makes me smile and almost gives me a warm glow as well. I think, oh, we're actually talking about similar subjects, and that's a complete example of serendipity, happy accident. We didn't plan it; it just happened.
Absolutely. And I would say back to Trello, because of my own route to information, I don't tend to use Trello. I just know that I'm going to be using those channels, those websites, and so on. But the pleasure is because you're going to go onto a different platform. You're going to introduce me to a different author and so on. Is listening to your account, then I'm invited on the spot to react to it. And what I've noticed is that it makes me remember the content really, really well. And that takes into one of your favorite subject matter, which is active learning and active listening. So yeah, fascinating.
And then we move on to marketing tech and apps. And I think you've said that maybe the In the News is the section you find the hardest to prep for. I actually find that this is the hardest to prep for me. And maybe it's because sometimes maybe we'll have to change the name of the segment to something a little bit wider, because in my head, marketing tech and apps means something on your iPhone or a gizmo. And I think you're a lot better at this part than I am, because you 1 week it might be a Google thing that helps you with a presentation. The next week, you've got a light that you're showing or a piece of kit like a microphone or something like that. And I think I tend to get a bit focused on thinking it has to be about apps that appear on your phone. So yeah, I love the marketing tech and apps section, but I do find sometimes I just don't get that creative spark to look a little bit differently.
We have reviewed, or it would be by the time we get to number 50, we'll have reviewed more than 200 tech and apps to make life easier as a marketer and a content creator, which is extraordinary, which then gives me a bit of a segue and into our first announcement, which is around repurposing. So across the board, Roger and I have been talking about the different segments and how we can add more value, how we can learn new things as well. So watch this space, whether it's in the news, whether it's content spotlight, marketing tech and app, whether it's this week in history, whether it's the content creator shout-outs or film marketing. We're going to be looking at ways to repurpose those segments into different types of media and, of course, get your reaction.
Yeah, and that makes me think about this week in history, because I think you always say, Pascal, that all the marketing tech and apps that we enjoy today wouldn't be possible without those pioneers from the past and where we are today. And this week in history allows us to celebrate those people, those pioneers those geniuses. But we also, we talk about films in This Week in History. We talk about TV shows This Week in History. I mean, in fact, out of all of the segments, This Week in History is probably the one that gives us the widest scope because, when I look back through history, something will grab my eye. I think we even did Henry VIII one week, and that's because I just like the Henry VIII stories and the Tudors and the Six Wives and things like that. So we talked about it, and that's fine. But you never, the still sparks of ideas come out from whatever we talk about.
I really like This Week in History. Two things. It's obviously pure nostalgia. You and I can reminisce about being children, teenagers, young adults, but also those news, by and large, not always, hasten to add, we were around, so we can relate to it. I mean, we had a great conversation last week about Live Aid, but the one thing that came through, because what we're trying to do with This Week in History is join the dots between the iPad or the mobile phone that you've got in your hand and what came before. And what came before is always in around air travel, I find, and now space travel is always around video, TV, radio production, and of course the world of tech and computing. So we've looked at the progression of the early days of Microsoft or Apple and so on. What is actually very interesting, sorry Roger, is particularly around space travel. You could say it's just a coincidence, but it's very symbolic that you and I have, over the course of a year, I've looked at everything from the early 40s, the V2 rockets, all the way to Man on the Moon. And only a few days ago, of course, Richard Branson was part of a small team of people who flew into space.
Exactly. And incredible to see that progression. Yuri Gagarin was he the first man? He was the first man to go into space in a rocket, wasn't he? And now we're almost on the brink of very rich people being allowed to go into space on a jolly, I guess.
Quite. Although you could try to take part in the omage.com competition, Roger, and you could maybe win 2 tickets to join Richard Branson in the next time he goes into space.
So, would you prefer to go into space with Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, or Elon Musk?
It has to be Richie.
I think good old Richard.
I think for me, it's also because I perhaps have a strong affinity with him as a character. I remember one of my first business books that I kind of bought for myself was Losing My Virginity. I don't know if you read that one.
Oh yes,
and. Yes. Which I think you always gave you had the odd looks in the underground when you used to read that book because the cover actually said Losing My Virginity, and then you had to look at the small print to see it was Richard Branson's story.
Exactly.
So maybe because I know more about him, maybe because with respect to the other 2 characters, I suppose it's very, very critical of me, but there's been some transgressions which I don't want to, so and which would maybe be supporting a British entrepreneur and inventor.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's not just internationally well-known, recognisable superstars that... is that a description for Richard Branson? But anyway, it's not just those people on those pedestals that we talk about. We also shine a spotlight on creators from our own network. The creator shout-outs, which is the next segment of the show. We're giving shout-outs for our close friends, Richard Tubb, Mark Asquith, Stephen Thomas, Chris Marr. We've given shout-outs for loads of people, and we will continue to do it because, these people are inspiring, and some of the content they put out is absolutely worthy of everybody's attention.
This is an important segment for you and I. In fact, when we were discussing what we would do with the podcast in May and June of last year, it was decided of feeling connected again because we were all literally felt very, very disconnected from people, stuck working from our spare bedroom, but also recognizing that everybody can be a source of inspiration, including people who start something brand new. And we have given shout-outs people starting a brand new podcast or starting blogging for the first time or whatever, as well as people who've been doing it for some time. You are all, in your own ways, an inspiration for Roger and I, and we wanted also to play our part in increasing your visibility.
And of course, the last section of the show is film marketing. And we've already talked about how important that is to us. both from a motivational point of view, from a fun point of view, but also learning about marketing again. And we have reviewed some incredible films. And you and I, being geeks, will always orientate, I guess, towards science fiction style films. But I think we've been pretty good in offering a wide variety. I mean, we did Mamma Mia as an example of something non-science fiction and non-horror or whatever.
The range is quite extensive. I mean, we're soon going to come to 50 films. Again, watch this space about the repurposing of that content. I remember you and I had discussions. So we want to talk about films, but we thought, can we get away with it? I mean, will people say, hang on a minute, this is all a big con. What you want to do is talk about films only. You just pretend you talk about marketing as well. But the film marketing allowed us to do both. And I have been the first one to be super impressed, but also delighted about how rich, informative, but also truly inspirational the marketing campaign those films have been. It's actually was beyond my expectations, I'll be quite honest with you.
And are you able to choose your favourite film that we've talked about over the last 50 episodes, or is that too hard?
In terms of the campaign, the marketing campaign, the one that I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot to learn from that. Oh my goodness. I would almost need to split it between which one had a better social media campaign, which one had the better. I mean, I would need to do that to be fair. But I will say that The Invisible Man, in terms of a campaign, is one that has stayed with me. I mean, I remember all of them because, to your point, Roger, the research is quite extensive. Back to almost in the news, sometime I feel bad because we have to take things out. Yes. Otherwise, the episode would go on forever. So you do the research, you discover the incredible work of the producers primarily and the distributors, and then like actually good editing, you've got to take things out. And I think they all had a role to play in being a source of inspiration for marketers. But I would say The Invisible Man, No Man's Land, and actually as a lesson about what not to do would be also Blade Runner 2049. These are the three that if you push me, I would probably use, but they are all amazing. I mean, Ghostbusters before the internet, using the special telephone number where you could listen to a message from the Ghostbusters themselves. The list goes on. And for something that I wasn't sure that the audience would warm to, or just say, I expected the opposite of being sure. I thought they listened to all the other segments, and this one would be seen as, good on you guys for talking about your favorite subject, but I don't buy into it. And of course, we've heard the opposite, haven't we?
Yes, absolutely right. People, I think the film marketing for the listeners and the viewers is the foundation of the podcast as well. The rest of it is good, but the film marketing is the thing that binds it all together. And like you, I would find it difficult to name specifically which was my favourite. I mean, even just a week ago, I think talking about Skyfall and the remarkable product placements and marketing campaigns by those product placers just blew my mind. The other ones that stick out for me was The Lost Boys. Again, that was a good one. And then the other film that was also set in the same town in California, Us. That was a good one as well. So massive memories. So Pascal, it's been so good over this last year, and they always say that most podcasts don't make it past 7 episodes. Wow. So here we are in episode 49.5. So what are we going to do for episode 50?
Well, we're going to make it count. It's a very important milestone. Because it's a exquisite looking number, 50. Look at this. It will be a year to the day, give or take, how you look at the calendar. And what we're going to do, no surprise to many of you listeners, we're going to do a film marketing special.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at maybe a number of films, and also we're going to have a special guest.
So it's really well worth looking out for. And we're not going to tell you who the special guest is just yet. We want to try and build a little bit of anticipation. But do please watch out for that special episode number 50, a film marketing special. And it's going to be a good one. But Pascal, that's not it, is it? In episode 49.5, we also have another special treat for you listeners and you viewers. And is it a little bit embarrassing what's going to happen next?
Pretty much. So our editor, Tim Alton, has been able to collate and gather all the mistakes, all the fluff line, all the embarrassing moment into our summer 2021 outtakes.
And I'm so looking forward to this because obviously you listen to and watch the finished product and all of the funny stuff of us making mistakes, swearing, giggling, laughing, getting sweaty and hot, the strimmers starting in the garden, all of that gets edited out by the amazing Tim. So you always see the polished product. And I know some of the things that went wrong, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this compilation. So that's how we're going to end the show today. We're going to go straight into our blooper reel. So any closing thoughts, Pascal, before we hit the listeners and viewers with those cock-ups?
No, I want to say thank you to all of you for making this first year of production so enjoyable. We thank you for every like, comment, and share. It means the world to us.
And I will echo that sentiment as well. So that's it from Pascal and I for today. We're going to go straight into the blooper reel, and we'll see you soon on episode number 50. I forgot to have a glass of coffee before a sip of coffee before we started.
I just don't know what to do with my hair anymore, Roger. So I'm hoping it's going to stay where it is.
Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. We're here every week to cup, like I said I would. Totally. Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast, where we usually talk about stuff. We usually talk about the latest news, tech, and marketing at blah, 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 blah.
The voice of the Marketing and Finance Podcast and the author of Cats, Mats and Shit. No, not shit. I was going to say...
Cats, Mats and Shit, yes. That's the second book. We are getting good at the introductions, aren't we?
Yeah. And in this segment, we give...
And in this part of the show...
Oops, I'm still busy putting my notes together.
Messing.
Roger and I gave somebody out there a salute and we celebrate their work and how blah, 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 putain.
We sort of move on now because we've been... Blah, blah.
And in... All right.
Breathe. According to a report from The Information... What am I doing? Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have released their own podcast on Pascal, please feel free to hit me with a baseball bat.
Thank you, Roger.
In 1844, Captain J.N. Taylor of the
And in 240... Oh, shit. That's me now. The HMS Bounty is seized in a mutiny by... merde. Roger and I surprise each other with a found... Oh, merde. I got that wrong.
I love it when you say merde. It makes me laugh. It's so good.
Yeah. Putain de merde.
In 1903, Toy Story... Let me say that again. Sorry.
Hang on. Oh.
Yeah. In 1903, Toy Story... I'm not going to be able to say this now. So, ... And who framed Roger Rabbit? Oh, please, Eddie, please. The number of companies hiring CMOs, that's... Oh, dear. Right, okay. With about half of those jobs going to women. Executive recruiting firm Russell Reynolds Associates found this by studying... Bollocks, you were doing so well there.
By studying... I don't think that's what they did, Roger.
Thing according to the drum.com as the short social media... bollocks to that. I knew I was going to screw that up. Online grocery sales... launches into space on board Soyuz TM-12 with Commander Oh God, I'm going to screw this one up as well. How do you pronounce that? Anatoly
Artsibarsky.
Artsibarsky.
Yeah.
Anatoly Artsibarsky.
Don't say artsy.
Artsibarsky. Good God. You did this deliberately, Pascal. Launches into space aboard Soyuz Falcon. Oh dear. I'm having trouble with this. Oh, gosh, I'm getting sweaty now. Launches into space aboard Soyuz TM-12 with command... Oh no! Do you know I've got a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy character called Slarty Bartfast in my head now. In 1991, the British... Oh, this is so unprofessional. Sounds incredible. No. Oh.
In 1995, astronaut Elaine... Oh, is it Eileen? Sorry. Do you say Eileen?
Eileen, yes, yeah. That's Eileen.
Sorry, in 1995, astronaut... Oh, shit. That's going to be my choice. Eileen.
Come on, Eileen.
In 1995... Bugger, you sang that song. Man.
I'm going to get the giggles now.
Oh, no. We've always managed to avoid it, you know? Oh, you shouldn't have sang that song, man. It's in my head now. Oh, no. No. Okay. You bugger. You sang that song, didn't you? All right. I'm going to read a few times, mess it up, and then it's going to be right. Okay.
Hold on a sec. My eyes are watering now.
You ready?
Oh dear.
Shit.
My glasses have steamed up as well, for goodness sake.
And in 1995...
Oh dear, oh dear.
We're going to have to change the news. I can't do it.
Could we risk starting it again?
Well, we were halfway through, so...
Yeah.
No. Shall we just sacrifice this one? Because I don't think I can say her name without bursting into laughter.
No, that's fine. We'll just miss it out.
All right. Actually, I'm going to try now. This is bad, isn't it? Okay, so we'll start from the beginning, yeah? All right, starting again. In 19... No. No.
Can we press pause on...
Well, we'll pause everything. Damn!
Yeah,
Give ourselves a round of applause here.
Hey, word perfect. Fan-dabby-dozy.